So I'll wait a couple of minutes just to make sure that everyone's online. But basically, I'm Andrew Gordon, and thank you for attending our event today, How to Make Money from Your Idea, webinar part 1, which is do it yourself and create your own business. There are 2 routes when you'd like to take your product to market. The first is licensing, and the second is self-manufacture. In today's webinar, we'll be talking about the latter, so self-manufacture. So we're going to have 3 segments, followed by a Q&A and a final conclusion. Feel free to ask questions in the chat box on your right, and if we run out of time, we'll definitely follow up with you afterwards and make sure all your questions are answered. So I'm quickly going to introduce you to the people that are going to speak in today. I'm Andy Gordon. I'm a lead designer for Innovate Product Design USA. I graduated from Bournemouth University School of Design and Engineering with a Bachelor of Science in Product Design. I've also worked as an industrial designer for the multidisciplinary creative consultancy Martin Design in Düsseldorf, Germany. Also going to be speaking today is Damon Meredith. Damon is an entrepreneurial founder of New Soda, the makers of SyncStation. SyncStation is an award-winning revolutionary flat colander that can be used in and out of the sink. Damon is a multiple ideas man. He's developed a number of kitchen product ideas over the last 10 years. Damon comes with a wealth of knowledge of how to get your idea from your head all the way to market. Also talking today will be Larry Udell. Larry's the founder of the California Invention Center, as well as the founder of over 30 corporations and inventor organizations. He provides consulting to both startups and Fortune 500 companies. He often lectures at inventor, corporate and government functions throughout America and for the USPTO, and in other countries for the World Intellectual Property Organization. Alison Gale. Alison is Innovate Product Design's new product development advisor. She works with clients introducing their product or idea to the market. With a business studies degree and postgraduate qualifications in both marketing and purchasing, Alison has a really good deep understanding of the motivations and requirements of companies when looking at and deciding on new products. So to begin with, I'm going to talk to you about design, develop and visualizing your concept in preparation for prototypes. So if you give me 2 seconds, I'll just pull up my slide. Okay. So hopefully you'll all be able to see my presentation there. Like I said previously, I'm Andy. I'm a product designer at Innovate. And today I'm going to talk to you really about the importance of the design process, what Innovate offers, and as well as obviously how important that is for things like prototyping. So initially we at Innovate create product visualization, so it's something that goes through the design process to create product visuals for gaining investment, to show to manufacturers, to gain further funding. The reason we do that and promote that for our clients is that product visuals are very important in selling an idea or trying to make money from your idea. As you can see here, our brain processes visual information a lot quicker and a lot more effectively than it would do, say, for example, us explaining an idea or having a little scrap on a bit of paper. So I'm going to quickly run through our presentation boards and our process. So initially what we would do, we'd have a sit down with a client, we'd go over their idea, find out what they want to do with it. From that idea, we'd really look at the feasibility of how it could work, how it potentially would go together, really think about the design aspects of a project. As you can see here, I'm just showing an example of Pizza Fritter, which is one of our US clients' projects. And you can see here we'll brainstorm ideas, we'll do some key initial sketches to make sure that our client's happy with it. So it's really been thought through, it's more than just an idea. Next is what we'll do, once the client's happy with that, is we'll go into visualization, so 3 presentation boards. So as you can see here, Pizza Fritter is it's a component that fits into a dish and it's portions off different aspects of a frying pan. Really nice, unique idea, and as you can see, it's clearly shown what it does on our initial beauty shot or presentation. Next, what we do is look into some of the technical aspects of the product, so how it would go together, potential materials, what its function does. And this is really important, especially for prototyping. This initial stage allows us to look into different aspects of how things could be done. It's more than just an initial idea, it's a well thought out product design. Next is we provide clients with a user board. So this is how a user interacts with the product itself, showing key steps of how it's done. So what is a prototype? A prototype itself is basically a preliminary model of something that you learn from or you develop further. And obviously with a new idea or design, often prototyping is inevitable, because if it is really new, you don't know whether it's going to work. You don't know, there might be an aspect of a design that you're not sure about, that you think, oh, I need to test that. So prototyping is often extremely important within the design process. So there's a few different types of prototypes. The first one is a visual prototype. So that's basically how it's going to look. And that's all that really does. So that's quite a cost-effective way of showing an investor how potentially the look and feel of a product will be. It won't test the functionality, it's purely aesthetic, so how it does look. The next stage is what we often advise our clients to go down, which is a proof of concept prototype. And all that does is demonstrates the key functionality, so how it works, and resolves any sort of technical aspects of the design. Proof of concept is a little bit more expensive than the visual prototype, but what we try and do for our clients is use off-the-shelf components to bring down costs, because especially with inventors, cost is particularly important. So if we can do that before a presentation prototype, for example, it's enough to usually gain funding, as long as someone knows that it will work. So a presentation prototype, that's basically a combination of the previous two, a visual prototype and a proof of concept prototype. So that's how it would look and how it would go together, how it would work, so everything combined into one. So it's a really nice visual marketing prototype of how something would work. The final type of prototype is a pre-production prototype, and this is particularly applicable to those going down the self-manufacturing route, as you need basically a pre-production prototype is just before you manufacture this. So you want to make sure that everything works correctly, everything fits. If you were going along a mass manufacture route like injection molding, you'd want to make sure that all that kind of bits and bobs are really refined before you, I suppose, hit the button and go with your final design. So I'm going to show you an example again of Pizza Fritter. So that we provided basically the presentation prototype, which is a little bit further along than the proof of concept prototype, but we did prove the principle. So you can see all the different components there. We'll take into consideration manufacturing processes, how this could be made as a one-off, because often it's very different from how it would be made finally. And we'll try and make it as close as possible to the final design. As you can see here from the visuals, how much of an impact an actual product prototype can have. If you've taken this along with you somewhere to investment, they're going to think, wow, they've really gone the full way through the design process. They know how this is going to work. They know how this goes together. So it really does have a great impact for a lot of our clients. And finally there, in context, so if you took a frying pan with you and you actually showed this in context, I think that does really does wow an investor. And again, there just a quick shot of one of how the user would interact with the prototype itself. If you do want any more information, please feel free to contact us on the Innovate website, and we'd be more than happy to either take a call or email you and get back to you. Thank you very much. So next I'm going to pass across to Alison, and Alison's going to run through quickly her presentation with you. There you go, Alison, all yours.
Hi, Andy. Thanks very much. I'm going to be talking now about marketing and distribution options of getting the product out into the market. So first of all, it's best to kind of really think about your market. Who is the market? Who are the key markets? And for each market, what's their potential size? What's the geographical spread? Who are the main competitors and what are the main competing products? What are the opportunities for growth and what are the key emerging trends in each of the markets? Then think about the consumers and really identify every possible use and type of customer and type of retailer for your product. Think about their needs, their wants, their demographics, their lifestyle, and think about their buying behavior. Where are they currently buying their products? What are they currently buying that could do a similar or possibly similar role to your own product, and why are they buying that? And just, get into the detail of why they're buying and what they're buying and where they're buying it from. There's plenty of ways to kind of research this type of information. Go shopping yourself on all the channels that you might look to be selling your product. There's lots of market and consumer reports out there. There's many product and trend analysis. There's trade magazines. Also look at the consumer press, look at it from a consumer's point of view. There's lots of stats on the government agency websites, such as demographics and spending habit information, web searches, and also blogs. Very important these days, blogs. And also think about focus groups. You could run some focus groups with your target audience just to find out a bit more about them and what makes them tick and what's really going to key them into your product. And then moving on to the marketing strategy, in terms of your product, think about the product, think about how it's positioned against anything else in the market that could be perceived to be doing a similar thing to your own. What's the unique selling proposition, the USP? What competitive advantage does it have over anything else? What are its key benefits? Why would somebody want to buy the product? And what are the development opportunities? If a competitor was to respond to your product, how would you then respond to their product? And is it a one-off purchase? Is it a repeat purchase? How can you develop to maintain and sustain your market share? In terms of price, think about what price the market will take. What's the perceived value? Is it something unique that you can put a higher price on, or do you really need to play hard on price if there are other things out there that do compete quite heavily for it? Then moving on to promotion, all about getting the message out there to the end consumer, but also to each link in the supply chain. There's many paid for options such as TV adverts, billboards, print media, direct mail, but there's also lots of free advertising such as press advertising, press releases and advertorials and editorials in the trade magazines. Also consider your online presence, and bloggers and social media these days are becoming increasingly important and powerful. So think about how you can work with some big bloggers in your industry. Think about trade events, consumer exhibitions, industry awards, and also really consider how you want your brand image to be portrayed within the market. And then finally, distribution, and we'll now move on to the distribution options. So there really are three key distribution options, and these can be combined, and they probably will develop over time as your product grows in the market. So the three main options would be to sell through a wholesale distributor, sell through and direct to retailers, or sell direct to the end consumers. And again, there'll be many factors to consider. You may think whether you want to be exclusive or intensive distribution. Think about the nature of the product, how complex is it to use, how easy is it to sell, that type of thing. The market size, the market geography, is it quite a small area or is it nationwide or is it in fact international? Your specific channel and industry that you operate in may dictate as to some of the strategies that you can employ. Who are the other key players in the industry and what channels do they use? The risk of each channel and also the resource availability and capabilities. So looking at each in turn, a wholesale distributor, the main benefits would be lower marketing costs because they'll be showing your product in their catalogues, they'll be taking it to trade events and trade shows, so they'll be getting your product out into the market, they'll be talking about it for you. Lower logistics costs for you because you'll be using their warehousing and their distribution, and also they'll have established distribution channels, they'll already be selling into retailers that you want to be selling your products into. And they can be also very, very useful in helping you reach new markets, either new geographic areas in the US or when you're looking to move overseas. They've really got the experience and can help you break into new markets. However, there are of course downsides, and the main one being there is a lower margin because you're introducing another link in the supply chain, so they need to take their percentage of the sales. You'll also be more distant from the end sales and the end consumer. You may think that's a good thing, but you may feel that you want to be more involved with the customers that are buying and using your product. If the distributor's got a very large portfolio of products, just think how prominent and how visible your product will be within their wide range. Are they going to be focusing mainly on distributing, or are they going to be focusing more on selling and really talking about your product, and will it get a good share of voice or will it get hidden behind other products that they've been working with for longer? Just consider that as a big factor. They also may demand high volumes. If you're wanting to launch into a new area, they may want to take very high volumes into their warehouse. And just think about if you can respond to that. Do you have the cash flow to get all the stock in for them, or is that something you need to consider? Some distributors may also wish to see a proven track record in the industry before they take the product on. So it may be that you launch with retailers first and then as you grow bigger, also sell through a wholesale distributor. And how to find them. You can find out about them. Speak to manufacturers. They're bound to be working somewhere already. Talk to trade associations, trade press, trade shows, social media, and also think about web search. There's plenty of information out there to research. And also really understand the role of the manufacturing representatives in the industry as well. They'll be taking products from several manufacturers and selling it into retailers and distributors. They'll be taking a percentage. They work quite differently. They work on a percentage basis of any sales that they make. But there may be some that you can also speak with and consider operating using them. So then looking at selling direct to retailers, a greater margin because you've got one less step in your supply chain and also an established customer base. Each of the retailers will be working already and selling to consumers who know that that's a place to go to buy your type of product. However, of course, the cons: increased marketing costs for yourself because you then need to be speaking to all the retailers and helping them to understand and learn about the product. You'll have higher logistics costs because you won't be able to piggyback on the back of the wholesale distributor. You'll be needing to carry your own stock and send it into retailers as and when they ask for stock. There are fulfillment houses that you could possibly use to do this, who could receive your orders, dispatch and pack them. However, again, that does of course come with a cost. And also consider the geographical coverage of retailers. Are they in the areas that you need them to be to grow the sales you want to grow? So consider all possible retailers. You've got the big bricks and mortar stores, you've got the big box retailers down to national, regional chains and also small independent chains. Think about the web stores. There's some very obviously big web stores out there, home shopping networks and also big mail order companies. It may be that you can start locally with some smaller independent companies, test out your product on the market, see how the market responds to it. You may need to make changes either to the product, to the pricing or even the packaging, and it's good to do that while you're working locally with independents before you actually launch it out to the big players who are going to want to be sure that you've actually market tested the product first to make sure everything's as it should be. And again, there's many research sources out there. Think about trade shows, again, mailing lists, retail store directories, share rooms, referrals, LinkedIn. There's many resources out there. Then looking to sell direct to a consumer, obviously much higher margins because you're not having to give anybody a share of the percentage in the way. Also full control over the sales process. However, the big downside to that is hugely increased marketing costs because you're having to be then talking to all of the end consumers yourself. High logistic costs because the onus will be on you to make sure that all the orders are packed and distributed and sent out to all the end consumers. You'll have to organise all the warehousing and distribution yourself. Again, you could use a fulfillment house. That's another thing to consider. Equally, you can have higher customer service costs because you will be the only point of contact with consumers having bought and used your product. So rather having a retailer that can handle those for you, they will all be coming to you directly. So consider the impact of that. And also there will be a slower growth in your distribution network purely because you're having to grow the network yourselves. You can't piggyback on an existing distributor's network. And again, many ways to reach consumers: exhibitions, fairs, mail order, consumer magazine advertising, and online. So there's a table here. I won't stay on this slide for too long now, and if you view the webinar again, you'll be able to pause and take a greater look at this. But this just shows, for instance, if you were to sell £1 million worth of your product, just the percentage you would receive through each of those routes and where the percentages would go off to the other players in the supply chain. So looking at that point further, it's important to consider that although 80% of total retail sales would seem very appealing if you're selling direct to consumer, do consider that the onus of fulfilling and driving and achieving all those sales will be on yourself. So as a comparison, if you've got £1 million of sales through a wholesale distributor, you might just get 5%, but that is $50,000, versus if you're doing it yourself and you achieve gross sales of £50,000, you will get $40,000 of that, an 80% share, but it is a much smaller amount by the time you've taken into all of your expenses taken off of that gross profit, because you have got, as we've discussed before, many more expenses to discuss and to think about. So if you want to look at the options further, you can have a copy of the slides obviously in the webinar recording, but also on our website, on our American Innovate Design website, we do have an invention calculator app that you can download, and that gives you the option to input various figures, various market sizes, various uptake figures, just so, and it gives you some very simplified figures as to how that might result financially for you. And again, if there's any further questions, I know we're running a Q&A session throughout the webinar, but if there's anything else that comes up at a later date, please feel free to email me, alison@innovatedesign.co.uk. Many thanks. I'm now going to hand back to Andy, who will carry on with the presentation.
Sorry, Guy, I think we seem to have a problem with the communication in the US, but I wanted to ask a few questions to Damon here, who is obviously he's the entrepreneur and done SigStation. Damon, what design steps did you take to get into the final product?
We went through probably only 2 or 3 steps really. So the first stage was some presentation style designs that Innovate did for us, and really they were completed to the stage where they were photorealistic rendered drawings. So you could look at this 3-page PDF and you could almost feel like you could pick the product up before it actually existed. And at that stage really I took it to as many people as I could to try and get some kind of feel about whether the product was viable and whether there would be a market for it. So I showed it to some key retailers, and they seemed to like it, so we developed it from there. So it really wasn't a question of doing all the stages at the same time. I kind of took the first steps, got a bit of feedback, and then went off and developed the product. So after that, really, it was a question trying to give it some energy, because we felt that the product was potentially a little bit flat. It's quite an odd item. It goes in the bottom of a sink. It's not very glamorous. So we did some surface detailing and splash pattern designs, and developed a logo and incorporated that into the product. Worked on the whole design, that sort of thing. So that was probably the second stage. And then the third stage is kind of getting it ready for tooling. So you've got to make sure that it works for tooling. So it's an injection molded product. You've got to make sure the holes have got the right diameter on them, and they've got the right what's called draft on them to make sure the pins release and that sort of stuff. So there were 3 stages, I would guess, before it actually went into production.
Okay, that sounds amazing, really. Quite a long journey, really. What was your main problem? So what was the problem you sort of had to face?
I suppose really the main problem was being a beginner. I think what I've subsequently learned is even if you're not a beginner, the process is, it's an 18-month process. So there are just issues that come up, and The costing might not be correct, so you might have to make it thinner. I don't know, the various things that maybe make it not suitable for tooling. You've got strange things like the position of what's called a gate, which is the kind of mark that it makes where you've injected the plastic into the mould. So all of those things were little challenges, but I wouldn't say we had anything that was a major barrier to us progressing. They were just the usual product development cycle problems. But I suppose I was at a disadvantage because it was the first time that I'd done it, so I was managing this process as a beginner.
Yeah, well, yeah, I guess it's a learning curve as you go along, really. And why did you decide to create your own business instead of doing the licensing route? So what motivated you to do that?
I suppose it just suited me. I mean, I've met quite a few people with product ideas, and they tend to fall into two categories. Some people probably aren't maybe right to run their own business. Some of them don't even want to. And for those people, probably licensing would be the best route. And others quite like the idea of running their own business and setting one up, and I fell into that category. Obviously, the scope for you to make money by setting up your own business is much greater if you do it that way than licensing, but then obviously it's an awful lot of work and it's an awful lot of risk. And probably the hardest thing to do in terms of starting your own business is to find the time, particularly if you need to work when you're working full-time. It's probably near impossible to find enough time to develop your own business. And if you fall into that category, really, then you're much better off trying to license the product. But for me, I wanted to set up a business. I managed to find a way of finding the time to do it, so that's the route I took.
And now is your full-time job?
Yes, it is. Yes.
Oh, brilliant. Okay. And so, how do you distribute, and how do you distribute your product?
Well, I wanted to start simply. So we use distributors. So these are companies that have trade accounts with all the major retailers in the countries in which they operate, and it just enables us with one product to get it in front of all the buyers, all the stores, from a source where the stores are happy to buy it from. What you'll find, that depending on your product and the price point of these, but for our item, which is only a sort of $14 product, it's quite difficult to get the big stores to buy from you direct with one item, because it isn't really worth the kind of effort for them to set up an account with somebody who's only trading a single item.
Yeah.
So you really, your only way to get it into the stores is through distributors. And that's the route we've taken, really. So I'm able to sort of sell. We're probably in 1,500 stores around the world, but I've only got 12 customers. So I can run the business for the time being, just myself and a computer and an email account. And I guess that's the advantage of using distribution. And obviously you make less revenue, but your cost base is very low. So you don't really have to hold stock. You don't have warehousing. You don't need very many staff, etc., etc. So it's a very lean way to get yourself started. And it still enables you to get your product into important stores. So you're quietly building a little bit of a brand, whilst not really taking an awful lot of the risk, apart from obviously the initial setup cost of getting the product made. But to suddenly start distributing yourself is a completely different business and requires an awful lot more cash.
Okay, that sounds good. Okay, look, Damon, I'm sure we'll have plenty of questions to ask you at the end with the Q&A from the audience. In the meantime, I'd like to see whether, we have the, Andy and Larry back on. Are they okay?
Hopefully you can hear us now, guys. Sorry about that. It was a bit of a technical difficulty this side.
That's okay. That's great. I guess you know the weather has been bad here, and you must have had issues too. But anyway, so I'll pass you over back to Andy. He was going to ask Larry and introduce Larry himself. Okay.
Fantastic. Okay, great. As I said, Larry, I'm going to ask Larry a couple of questions. I've got him here in our San Francisco office, so if you don't mind, I'll be passing the phone back and forth after I've asked him a couple of questions. So, great. Larry, I'd like to first start and say, what do you see the most important design aspects that inventors need to take into account when presenting to companies?
Good morning. Well, first of all, companies will not even look or consider a new product unless there has been a great deal of work in accomplishing what the finished product will look like, including the packaging. So there is a considerable amount of work that has to be done from the idea concept all the way to hopefully establishing what a finished product will look like.
Thank you very much, Larry. Cheers. So how does someone find a manufacturer and how do you compare them? So, for example, quality control.
Well, there happens to be a tremendous resource of manufacturing opportunities. Besides the National Association of Manufacturers, NAM, headquartered in Washington, D.C., there is a California Manufacturers Association, and I believe most states in the United States have their own Manufacturers Association. There's also a very old publication which is still out and doing great. The Thomas Register of American Manufacturers is a terrific resource for finding out who is making what and where their plants are, who their executives are, and who you can talk to. I also recommend that in your own local community, there are small companies that need you to help them grow their company. And by virtue of the fact that they're looking for ways of growing the company, your potential new product could have terrific influence on their potential growth.
Thank you very much, Larry. Cheers. So what are some of the so Damon covered some of, I suppose, the aspects of starting his own business. What do you think you need to consider when you do start your own business?
First of all, you have to be slightly crazy to start a business because it's not just you personally. You are committing your family, your spouse, and if you have children, your children. The commitment is that starting the business will take a lot of time, effort, resources, etc., away from the family. So I'm not discouraging anyone from starting a business because that's the dream of a lot of people, but by the same token, you have to realize that you don't quit your daily job until you have established enough income from your business to do so.
Thank you. Okay. So, Larry, what sort of protection do entrepreneurs need when starting their own business?
Well, I have to isolate this as to the type of product it is. There are various ways, wherever you are in the world, of filing protection on your idea, invention. But at the same time, before you file anything to protect it, you have to do a lot of research as to what already exists. Just because it's not on the shelves of the stores you walk through does not mean there is not protection on it already. There's a lot of products on the market that have no protection, but they flooded the market at the appropriate time and made a lot of money. But by the same token, my advice has always been to do your homework, do your research, find out if there is similar products, how big the market is, and then look at what is required to file protection. Normally it takes quite some time in the way of years a filed patent becomes issued.
Great, thank you very much, Larry. That was really beneficial. I think Barbara, who's on the line, had a question for Alison. Barbara, have you got a question there for Alison?
Sort of a company that would distribute my product.
I think, as I touched on in the presentation, I think there's lots of resources out there to go and find out about the distributors in the market. talk to trade associations, look at the trade media, go along to the trade shows. I think there's nothing better than meeting these people face to face, maybe at a trade show, introducing yourself, introducing the product, and just kind of get their permission to send some information into them. Rather than try and phone them or just send something in cold, I think it's best to try and meet them face to face. Or if you have to phone, make sure you kind of get the name of the relevant person and speak to them in person before you send information through. And that way you'll know they're kind of receptive and they're warm to receiving the information.
Okay, great. I've also got a question which just popped up here from Cassie, and then I think that perhaps that's an introduction to a part 2 of a webinar, but this is, I think, to be answered by Larry, is how knowledgeable should you be to put together a licensing deal? Do you need an attorney?
Okay, Larry, we've got a question for you. It's basically how knowledgeable will you need to be to... sorry, would you mind repeating that?
Yeah, so how knowledgeable should you be to put together a licensing deal? Do you need an attorney?
Especially without any sales records, you need some form of protection that shows the potential licensor that you did go to the extent of investing money in protecting the product. You can license let's put it this way, you can license a technology without an issued patent. However, it's unusual, but at the same time, depending on what the product is again, if you're looking at a consumer product, it's beneficial to talk to those people in the industry that are in that business. By the same token, the reason you might want to have your attorney involved, assuming you have one or get one, is that they know the ins and outs of the agreement that's going to be signed. I'm working on one right now with Samsung for a client, and what we're asking for, they're not willing to provide in the way of upfront monies. By the same token, even with the protection, you have the leverage of being able to make certain logical demands, very gently though, in being able to license.
Thank you very much, Larry. Cheers. Damon, we've got a question here from Sam. So, what problems do you have, and what solutions did you find when taking your idea to market? So that's probably a tricky one, but...
Could you repeat that?
Yeah, sure, no problem. What problems do you have, and what solutions did you find when taking your idea to market? So any hurdles that you came up against?
I would say I didn't really have too many hurdles. I mean, I'd done the research. I'd shown it to a couple of key retailers. They said they'd take it when I'd made it, and I made it, and they did take it. I didn't really come. There's a lot of work to do, but I didn't really have any barriers, I wouldn't say. I mean, obviously, at a certain point, you've got to find the money to make the product, and I kind of got quite lucky with that. I found a friend who was willing to put the money up to make it. But I guess the problems are, as you would imagine, really. It's just a question of getting stuck in, and if your product's good enough, I think you can actually find it quite easy, because you're pushing it an open door. So people want new products, distributors need new products, the buyers of the major stores desperately need new products, and if you've got a good one, then you've got a good chance. So I wouldn't want to make it sound too difficult, because although it was a lot of work, it wasn't that hard, I wouldn't say.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. There's a question here as well. It's actually aimed at me, I think. So it's, what do I think about manufacturing in China? So I'd imagine there are probably a lot of you out there here that manufacture in China is a lot more cost effective, it's cheaper to get your product to market. But what I found is, realistically on an inventor scale, you're likely to be putting in quite a small order initially. So you might not be able to ream the cost benefits that a large company who's putting in a really large order, sort of associated benefits with that. And the reason for that is because you're going to have to realistically travel out to China, meet someone face to face. You're going to have to pay for your flight, your hotels, your travel when you get there. You're also going to have to pay your shipping costs from China to either the UK or the US. For example, things like materials, they're a global commodity. They have a fixed price in many cases. One thing I do find with manufacturing in China is, and we have this, I've had experience with this with the previous companies I worked with, was cultural differences and sometimes misinterpretations. So in many cases, manufacturing in China is great for large runs, but on a small scale for initial inventors, I'd say it's probably best to keep something local, especially for a pre-production run. Your tooling might be a bit cheaper out in China. It's how much the actual tools to create the mold, the actual mold itself. However, when you factor in all these other things like travel and flights, I think it can work out roughly the same. So yeah, that's great. Okay, what I'm going to do now is basically conclude. I'm going to say thank you very much for all the participants today for getting involved. That was really good information, and hopefully that have helped a lot of our inventors out there. And also introduce obviously part 2, which is going to be on licensing. The date is still to be confirmed, but we'll email all the participants of today and let you know what date's going to be confirmed for that. So thank you very much for tuning in to our first webinar. So I apologise for a few of the first technical difficulties and not being able to hear me. And thank you very much for attending. Thank you very much.